Hello, everyone. So today we are darring. Sorry. So it is day 5 of the 35-day challenge, 35 for life. And today I'm going to show you guys a freemium that I'm developing for you guys. And basically, what it is, it's going to be available for download, hopefully, in the next couple of days. And basically, just for anybody who follows the channel and wants to get it, right? You can download it just right off of my videos and stuff. So, what is it? What is it exactly I'm working for here, right? And so, basically, what it is the 7 steps to mastery, right? Now, it's not fully complete, but let me show you guys what it is, right? So, kind of just putting everything in perspective here. This is the 7 steps to mental mastery, 7 life structures assessment. So, what are we talking about when I say 11 structures? This is essentially going to be the structure of all my videos from now on, especially like if you're watching Prolific and you understand, you're like, hey, what's he talking about? Go back to this video or go back to these structures, and that will help you understand what it is I'm talking about. Again, this will be available for download, and this is also going to be used as sort of like a life instruction structure for the game. So if you were to jump into the game and start playing that, doing level 0, this is how it's based, and this is how I've created it. So let's actually talk about what I mean by the 7 life structures, which is essentially the 7 ways to look at, like 7 structures of how I look at life, right? And how I do that through my coaching. So introduction is basically like, hey, right, this is the to help you in your assessment of self and ultimately to help you building a better life. The framework is however you want to fit it in and is one of many you can use, right? It's really just a framework that I've developed. So I invite you to use this framework as well as others that you can use. This is based off of a lot of different ones that I've used, based off of the chakras, based off of the Maslow's hierarchy, based off of the Hawkins scale. I've used all these different ones and essentially boiled it down to these 7 essential steps to help people understand, right? So that's basically the structures. What it is, you can read all of that there as you go through. Actually download the thing. I'm going to, when I release this video, I'm going to actually put a pre-sale link, which will eventually become the download link. So you guys can do that. And I say pre-sale link, it's just the download link. Like you opt in, you get it, it'll send you an email, and then you'll be able to download this. So it'll be sick. So how the guide works is basically you'll have a title page with different names of the different life structures as well as the game stage it's on and how it connects with the game. There's going to be a brief explanation of each life structure and the relevant connections to that. Basically, I'll be telling you what is the life structure, how does it work, and what's essentially it. Then we're going to have the levels of a self life assessment. And this is actually really what I wanted to talk about and make it clear of just how each of the levels work in the game today. So what I mean by that is the 3 levels of life assessment are essentially growing or diminishing, which is easy, stable or unstable, which is normal, and then integrated or separated, which is hard. And then the idea of legendary. Now, really, legendary is just all of the different formulas added together in a single formula, right? While each of the levels of the life assessment are essentially going to be put together. Now we'll actually go through the life assessment when you go through. I'm going to make another video about actually assessing it. This is just me explaining each of the life structures so you guys understand what are the life structures, how they work. You can download it and then get a better understanding of what they actually are, right? So the gamer score you get off of this when you do the assessment is essentially just going to tell you where you stack out in each of them. Again, we're not doing that in this video, but that's basically what this page is. And it's going to tell you, like, if you use one formula, that's basically going to tell you how you are in extra mode. If you do normal mode, NPC mode, 2 formulas, hard mode, hero mode is going to be 3 formulas, and legendary, again, it's just going to be the scores from all the formulas stacked up. When I say extra, it just means extra NPC or hero. It's really about just how you're showing up in your life and the level of impact, right? So it's really just about how you want to grade yourself on this scale, right? Don't get too hard in your head about it. I'd love to see what your guys' comments are and see if this is helping or making any sense. Anyway, so let's talk about the first fundamental structures. Oh, we're cut off a little bit there, so I'm going to have to drop that down. But the 11 life structures are essentially the ego, the body, the spirit, your relationships, your community, your finances, and your livelihood. And those are essentially the 7 structures. Now, another way we can do that is understanding what each of these are. Is these are the 7 realms, the emotions, or the sins that represents each of these structures, right? So in the first structure, you have your mind, your joy, and then your sloth, right? So these are each of the realms. So basically, each of them, the realms are basically how do you interact with each of these structures. So usually you interact with the ego through your mind, you interact with your body through your body, you interact with your spirit through your spirit, obviously. And then, relationships, community, finances, livelihood, right? Those are the 7 realms, those are the structures, right? But then the emotions we interact with are joy, our faith, our sense of sovereignty, our love, our sense of law or boundaries, charity, and truth. And you might ask, well, are those emotions? It's like, well, yeah, certainly they are. And we'll talk about what that means. And then each of these are the sins or the things that kind of pull us away from that, which is sloth, envy, gluttony, desire, which can be also said for lust, war, which can be wrath in a way, but it's really more about war and the idea of conflict, greed, self explanatory, and then finally pride. And these are just the 7 sins that kind of pull you away that represent each of those life structures. Now, you might ask, why is this important? If you get into the 7 Steps of Mastery course, this will make more sense to you. If not, just kind of use it as an understanding of where each of these are lining up. Now, also, if you want to also get another understanding of it, you can use and let this represent each of the different chakra points, starting with number 1 at the root chakra, all the way up to the crown chakra at number 7, right? If that helps. So now let's talk about ego self view, which is the very first life structure. And that now, why do I start with this structure, right? Because a lot of the idea of the life structures is that it starts with yourself and expands out into your life. Now, the idea of the self, a lot of people might say, well, isn't that like your physical representation? And I would say no. The idea of yourself is actually first represented in your mind, right? Because your mind is the very first interface upon which you interact with the world, right? So your understanding of the world, your understanding of your relationships, everything is incumbent on the state of your mind. And so that's the very first thing we see. And you also see that your ego, your self view is the first part of that. So oftentimes there's this idea that as you see the world, so the world is seen by you, right? And this is the idea that everything you see in your life, whether it's negative, whether it's positive, whether it's a happy, healthy world, whether it's safe, dangerous world, whether it's everything's possible, whether everything's difficult, this is all based upon your understanding and the paradigms you have within your mind and how you view yourself. And so the idea is, yeah, you essentially are yourself at the very beginning. And that's what matters. And that's the very first framework upon which you interact with the world. And everything else stems from that. So if you're going to work on any other framework, you have to start there. So if you want to work on your money, if you want to work on your body, if you want to work on everything else, you have to work on the way you see yourself. A lot of people might call this identity, but the idea of identity really extends farther beyond the mind if you really want to step into that, because identity is tied to other things as well as the influence others have. But really, it's being able to isolate and understand the awareness of our mind. That is the very first step and the first thing you have to assess and understand where you're at. So the second thing we go on is your presence and focus, which now I put here a faith versus envy, which is like your ability to have abundance consciousness versus envy. And then that realm is stepped within your body. Now, the realm is the physical world, right? Your body is the second start because you can be trapped in a world where you're just your mind and you'll still exist there and you can get disconnected from your body. Anybody who's had a dream or a very like a lucid dream or remembers their dreams can know this, that you can have an entire world or existence in your mind and then your body can be separate from that. So the idea is, in order to interact with your body, you have to be able to bring your mind into your body. And in order to do that, you need to have presence and focus, which is the next ability or life structure, right? Which is in your body, but that's the next ability that we really focus on is your ability to have presence and focus. Because a lot of the time, when people are sort of playing the game of life, they have no idea how to really focus or really pay attention to what's happening in front of them. And that's what creates all the conflicts that's happening in their life because they don't have the ability to focus and really be present with their situation. This is when you have PTSD or some type of trauma and you have a reaction that's not based in logic and you start having irrational emotions. This is because you really struggle with presence and focus. I've seen about 40 to 60% of people in any given environment are usually stuck on this life structure. And usually this structure is unstable. And so if this one is unstable, then all the other ones following are definitely going to be unstable. Um, and this is the difficulty, right? Is that oftentimes a lot of people don't ever really advance in this stage, and it's sad because you're like, really, there's seven, and most people are stuck on stage two. Yeah, in my experience, yeah, that's where most people are stuck. So usually, if you struggle with your sense of self view or your ego or presence and focus, don't feel bad. That's where most people are. But honestly, you're in the first two stages. You haven't. There's still so much other more stuff you have to do, and it's very difficult to do at a high level until you've mastered presence and focus and your sense of view and your ego. Right. So now let's go on to the third level, which is your beliefs. Now, beliefs. Most people have adopted beliefs that come from outside of themselves. They don't even know what they believe. Like if you really ask them, what do you believe and why do you believe it? They can't tell you why, and they certainly can't articulate it. And the idea behind this structure is that you need to understand why you believe and what are the beliefs that are governing your idea. So here I say gluttony versus sovereignty. So the idea of gluttony is back in the day when we were hunter gatherers, we would see like sugar or easy access to food. Oh, and ooh, I actually had a mistake there. Here it says the realm is the mind, but the realm is not the mind. The realm is the spirit. So we are going to go through and change that right now because that's what we do when we see mistakes. Because the idea is that it lives within the spirit. Now, if you don't believe in the spirit or the soul, we'll just call it intelligence, right? So it's this idea of intelligence, or I just say spirit. So those who don't get it will get it. So the idea is spirit or intelligence is where this exists within you, right? Um, and this belief, when I say going back to gluttony and sovereignty, is that back in the day, we would just eat everything we can. And now when we have access to food or easy access to a lot of resources, we tend to gorge ourselves on them. And the difficulty is that if you're taking in a bunch of beliefs or ideas or information and you don't know where it's coming from, chances are you don't have a very strong idea of what your beliefs are or understanding why you have them. And as a result of this is probably driving a lot of your behavior and a lot of your ideas about how life functions and how it works. And this is probably leading you astray. And so when I say sovereignty, what that means is that now you have a kingdom. To be sovereign means to have a kingdom, or basically the idea of self-governance, right? And when you're able to govern yourself, it means that you're not just taking everything as it comes in. It means that there's almost a fortress around your spirit or your being, and you let in things that are congruent with that. Now, this isn't fully about how we operate within the world. This is really about how we operate within ourselves, right? When we're going to talk about how we do that later, but really a lot of this is from examining our own beliefs and our own sense of what is true for us, right? And this is all existing within the realm of our spirit, our soul, or our intelligence, whatever word you want to use for it. And that's really what this stage is all about. It's really gaining a sense of awareness. Usually, I would say about 10% of people are really functioning and building themselves on this stage where they're really aware of their beliefs, building on it, and structuring it. Oftentimes, when you see people arguing about things like politics, or they're adopting the beliefs of others, or they're representing parties, or they have very sort of segmented ideas that are based upon, like, oh, Descartes said this, or like, I'm Republican and you're Democrat. These are not people who are in stage three level thinking. They're not able to operate here because they don't have the ability to really understand how to assess beliefs. They really think in other this or. Like I said, this is about 10% of people. So if you're at this place where really working on this life structure is a big focus for you, you're about 10% of the population. It's pretty rare that most people are actually actively working on this stage of themselves, right? So this is aligned with the solar plexus chakra, where you get a lot of confidence in the world. And when you have true confidence, it's usually because you've worked very hard and understand what you believe and why you believe it, right? And like I said, only about 1/10 of the world is really sitting here and living here. Now, the next part we're going to have is the mastery of our emotions or our being, right? Now, the big pulls we have here is this idea of desire or lust on one end versus grace and love on the other end, right? And usually the best way to assess this or understand it is within the realm of our relationships. So this is where most people, like I would say about 5% of people or less, really have a mastery of this. Most of the relationships you have it happen because it was convenient. It was because you met them at work. It was because you went to school with them. It was because of some other factor that had nothing to do with your own decision making or your own deliberation. It wasn't based upon your beliefs. It wasn't based on your standards. It wasn't based. And you might even say, well, it's because we have mutual values. Probably not. Like, you'll have mutual values probably as a consequence of the factors or the flows you've been assessed to, but your own relationships are only going to resonate at the level you resonate within those flows. So what do I mean when I say resonate with flows? So for instance, let's say I go to church and I'm like, ooh, I really like going to church, and everyone thinks like me, prays like me, acts like me. Now, as we know, people don't actually think and believe and act the same, right? But usually when you go to an environment like a church or like a workspace, there's a level of conformity that needs to be done so that everything will go along, and the individual usually disappears. When the individual disappears and I'm forced to conform to that environment, now I'm in a space where all my relationships and my associations are based upon that conformity. Now, this might help if I've really been able to like stamp myself down and I don't care too much about it. But at some point, you're going to meet a friction in that relationship. And based upon your skill set, you might navigate it gracefully, you might navigate it really poorly. It's because of people's inability to really understand their emotions and their being why you have a 50% divorce rate in the United States and climbing all over the rest of the world. It's why so many people say they're alone and don't have friends. It's why you have relational breakdowns. And even though so many things in the world are getting better in terms of world hunger, the poverty to abundance ratio, the distribution of food, emotional well-being is going down the tube, right? Especially in these developed countries. And it's because of this, is that ultimately, because when you've neglected all these other life structures, it begins to show up in your relationships. And this is where you have systematized commodification of relationships. It's why we use Tinder and the internet to create connections instead of being able to have the skills to enforce and do that ourselves. And so many people are like this. And I would say about 5 people are really, really developed and really have an understanding of what grace and love is. And that might be like a really outlandish idea of it. But in my experience and my estimation, I think it's about that, about 5%. Very few people, 1 out of 20 really understands this and has this stabilized where they're really mastering this. So if you're one of the 19, chances are your relationships might work out, they might not, but you certainly don't feel like you can talk to everyone about everything. They're certainly not integrated, and you certainly can't rely on them in any meaningful way. Um, because that's what happens here. That's what happens here when these relationships go unexamined, and that is 95% of people. So it's pretty rough, but that's just one of my experiences. Here's where we get to integrity. Right now, I would say about 1% of people are really living in this idea, and so integrity is within the realm of community, and that's where you're really going to see where it lines up within your community. So this is where conflict or war versus universal law. Oftentimes, if we feel like our us versus them, this is not stable and you're not growing in this area. So usually if you're part of something like an organization, so for instance, if I go to like a Christian church, but I feel like I feel like I'm unable to, like, say, go to like a Buddhist church or an Islamic church, and I can't sit in there and be okay. This is unstable. So the idea is, how universal and understanding is your community, right? Because if you find out that if you don't have a community, that's an example. That's exactly what I'm talking about. If you're like, I don't really know what my community is, yeah. For most people, their community is going to be based on their workplace or their like religious organization, if you have one, or maybe like a coffee shop. But most of the time, it's bound to the economy. It's happened and controlled by an outside structure that's not based upon you, and it's not integrated at all. And so as a result of this, when I say integrity really, what I mean is, are you living in line with your values? And are those values in line with the laws that you're subject to, right? So when I say conflict or war versus universal law, really what we're getting down to here is, this is where it starts getting a bit more. I'm not going to say meta. I'd say metaphysical, but it's really where I'm just going to say war, actually, because I feel that's much more demonstrative of what's going on. But this is where really you just have to, your understanding and concepts of how the world works really needs to grow here, right? Because it went back, guys. What's going on here? But when I say that it needs to grow, it's really because, how would I explain this? The best way to explain this is, your understanding of the world really needs to grow at this point. One of the assessments you're going to see here later on, for those who jump into the assessment, is your ability to speak other languages. So if you like only speak one language, you grew up in the same place your entire life, and everybody in your community looks, thinks, and acts like you have never examined this structure. And some people will say, oh no, I have. No, you have not. You have not. And you're not, like, usually at this point, I would say less than 1% of people have actually examined the structure and know what it means and can speak on this level. So if you take my course, literally by the fifth week, for 90%, 99% of people, they're going to be talking about things they've never heard of or examined in their life. They're going to be like, what is going on? Because it's all going to be new, mind blowing stuff, because there's just this idea of living in the unknown and, like, not knowing what you don't know. That's what this is all about. And it's the idea of making sure that when you say something and when you do something, it's lined up with universal law. Like the idea of good versus evil, like the idea of something existing and being in alignment with the universes versus not being that. And 99% of people have never explored this idea of themselves. They live in it all the time. We all do. Um, but most people, like I said, it goes completely unexamined, right? And usually a good indicator of this is who your community is. So if your community thinks, looks, acts like you, is the same community you had since you were a kid, and yeah, chances are you have not examined the structure, have not built in that, and usually that is affecting your integrity. So this is where you get high levels of hypocrisy. This is where you got a lot of critical examination of, like, politicians, religions, race, a lot of the political issues we have, a lot of the issues of any idea we have, is because this part of humanity goes unexamined. And it's because most people don't even have a concept of what it is. Like, because remember, most people are stuck on level 1 or level 2. That's 60% of people. 10% of people get to level 4. 5% of people level 5% of people level 4. 10% of people level 3. 10% of people. So the top 10% of the world, they're existing at level 3. Once you get to like level 5, that's this tiny percentage. 1% of people are actually living here, actively working on this. So if you're like watching this and you're like, what's he talking about? I have integrity. Da, 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 da. I need to ask you, how many languages do you speak? I need to ask you, how well can you have a conversation with someone who's completely different than you? How well can you converse and work with someone who comes from a completely different background? How well do you understand the things around you? How well, if I asked you a question with any level of a critical examination, how well would you be able to give me an answer? Or be willing and able to find an answer. That's the level of examination and awareness we're talking about. This is someone who I ask, hey, what does this word mean in this language? And if they can't find it, they learn it the next day. This is someone where I say, hey, you were out of line in this. And they have such level of mastery of their emotions, it's just done. They have complete integration with the world. They know where they sit in. They're non-reactive. They really understand their community. This is high level stuff. This is super rare. And this is only level 5, guys. And I'm telling you right now, 1%, 1 out of 100 people is thinking and working on this. So if you took this, like the 7 Steps to Mastery course, and you got to level 5, you'd be in rare air because it's very, very difficult that most people are even examining or working on this. Even like at an extra mode, like at the lowest, easiest level difficulty, it's really the easiest level difficulty is really how many languages do you speak? That's level 1. How many languages do you speak? If you only speak one, chances are all the other stuff outside of this, you haven't even examined this, honestly. And you might be like, Oni, you keep pushing that. Actually take the assessment. We'll go through that later. Chances are level 5, you're not going to score very high. And if you do score very high on this, you're in that 1%, right? Because it's just super rare. As I've traveled and I've gone and I've seen, very few people are even thinking about this, the world in this way. Anyway, so push level 5 integrity, because this is now where we start stabilizing our contribution to the world. And this is now where we have self-expression, greed versus service. And usually this is the best way to see this is finances. So, I mean, this is money's a touchy subject for a lot of people. And like I said, now you're in the 1%er, right? Like you're well past the 1%er. This is people who have total self-expression, total mastery of their time, their finances. They're focused on service, and they're really living a win-win type of life. This is someone who is just completely been able to kind of break the system, right? And this is more of a mindset, guys. This is not necessarily arriving in such a way that you, how would I say, that you're just like this like an entrepreneur or like an Elon Musk or something like that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about where just everything, remember, perfect integrity means having alignment with everything. So this is now where your self-expression, your understanding of yourself, you're doing what you want with your time, you're doing what you want with your energy. And so the biggest way to do that is, and how you're going to check this realm, usually when we do the assessment, is where you spend your money, how you get your money, and all your ideas around money. And usually this is the easiest way to tell where you're at with this one. More people actually have an idea of this one and this because people worship money, and a lot of people put so much energy into money. But the reason this structure struggles so much and is so difficult for people to find alignment in is because all the others go unexamined and they try to jump to this one. And when you skip all those steps, it's really hard to lock this one in. So if you're really like, if you think of finances, you're like, oh man, that's kind of like a tightness for me. It's because usually your level of self-expression and your understanding of greed versus service and just all these other parts are going unexamined. I would say especially level 5, because that is the one I find most commonly where people have not even understood it. Like level 5 gets completely skipped and people don't even understand that it's a thing. Whereas back in the day, and ancient wisdom dictated it as being a prerequisite to so many other things and being foundational. So, yeah. So this is level 6. You're on the last one. And really at this point, you essentially have conquered self-mastery, right? Because you got this, because now you know how to express yourself, right? And you've really mastered this realm of finance. And so after that, we're now on purpose, which is your personal truth versus like the pride of your personal truth. And the best way to see this is within your legacy and your impact or your livelihood, right? And so basically, if you want to think, if I had a funeral and I died, what would be the impact and the implications of my life? This is a really good idea to check where you're at with the 7-5 structure. Now, this is not the actual assessment, but that's essentially what it is. It's just how much of my life am I living in and on purpose? How much of my life is happening as a result of my own values and my own deliberation and what I've decided to become versus, just happening to me. right? So to get to this level, level 7, this is where you're a very intentional, very deliberate, very self-manifested person. Usually the only people here who are working on this and actively engaging in this level are like very advanced people. So this is like high level book authors. This is millionaires. This is like not even millionaires actually, because it's not a financial thing, but this is like professional athletes. Not all professional athletes, but like a Kobe Bryant, like a LeBron James, an Anthony Edwards, a Luka Doncic, they're on this level of creation, right? They're on this level. These guys, these are because it's too difficult. This is where the only things that are happening in your life have happened because you've decided they're going to happen. You don't get lucky at this stage because if you were depending on luck, you didn't get here. So this is just like probably when I say 1 in a million, even if you say 1 in a million, that means about 8 million people are living here, and I think it might be rarer than that. I don't know how many people are actually living in this level. If you're at this level of purpose, you're probably one of one, and you're just fully lined up. And I'd say there's a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people there, but um to really do this at the high level, like especially at legendary level, oh boy, you're a special person, right? You're really doing something right. So yeah, I don't even know if most presidents are here. Like that's just I just think this is a very special category of human being to be in. So if you're here, good on you, man. You're a total stud, and I'm proud of you, whoever you are. And guys, that's basically